Welcome to Great Aspirations, Wellspire Advisors podcast series on life, wellness, and financial advice. Each episode shares the experiences of extraordinary people whose stories inspire others to think big, find balance, and explore the possibilities of achieving health, wealth, and happiness. And now, here's your host, the CEO of Wellspire Advisors, Michael LaMena.
Welcome to Great Aspirations. I'm Mike LaMena, CEO of Wellspire, and it's an honor to have as our guest today Robert Wickens, a Canadian professional race car driver renowned for his success in Formula and touring cars. A former IndyCar driver, Robert's life changed dramatically in an instant following a devastating crash in 2018 that left him with a spinal cord injury. What followed was a redefinition of his career, and through relentless determination, he returned to racing, adapting, rebuilding, and ultimately reclaiming his place behind the wheel. Today, as a driver for DXDT Racing, Robert represents more than the performance he provides on the track. He represents what it means to push forward, to evolve, and to use one's platform to inspire others. His journey reflects a deeper truth at the heart of this season of Great Aspirations, that giving is not always about what you offer at your best, but what you choose to embody and share in the face of challenges. Robert, thank you for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
What an intro. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's well-deserved. So you and I have a chance, you and I have had a chance to start to get to know each other a little bit. And, before we talk about the events that, happened in Indy, that was kind of a critical inflection point that changed the kind of trajectory you were on. Let's talk about how you originally got started in racing. Like, where did that passion, that interest come from?
Yeah, before I knew it, it was, I was just a young kid, rambunctious, jumping off the walls, a very high energy 2-3-year-old boy. And from what I've heard from the story from my parents, I wouldn't really play with anything other than a race car or anything with wheels. And, we came across just a race on TV, and I was just hypnotized by the screen. And, my parents kind of looked at each other. They're like, that's interesting.
There's
and
something here.
So they started buying me more toy cars, and I was more content and more content. But, I'm in an era where you can't just plug and play, have anything you want all the time, right? So there's then like scouring cable channels trying to find the next race that was on, and they couldn't find it.
It's not today,
right?
where you can find any athletic event anytime you want on demand.
Exactly. Right? YouTube didn't exist.
Yeah.
But,
I grew up with 4 channels, no cable in my household.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But also during that era, there was a movie called Days of Thunder that had just come out, and so my parents bought the movie on VHS.
Okay. And
it was just on constant loop in the household. And obviously there were certain scenes in that movie that are not appropriate for a 3-year-old boy. So my grandfather made an edit somehow where just removed all the dialogue. So it was just only racing scenes.
Oh, wow.
And that was just on constant loop in the house for probably the better part of 2-3 years. But what ended up happening was I would watch a race on TV, whether if it was NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar. It didn't really matter. For me, it was just like the cars. I don't know if it was the colors, the sounds. Who knows, right? But then when the race would finish, I would then reenact the race.
Oh my gosh!
On like my little like Hot Wheels, Matchbox carpet, right, racetrack. And I got more and more with my older brother Trevor, who's 5 years older than me.
Okay.
Racing was on TV in the house so much that the whole family became fans. Right. And so we started like with a fresh piece of carpet, like racetrack carpet.
Okay.
And as our race would go on, we would start like coloring in like the groove, so it would get like darker and darker as the race went on. Like we got really detailed.
Oh, wow.
It was super cool, and understanding like our like remake crashes and stuff. So if a car crashed, like if the number 6 NASCAR crashed, I would like smash it under the couch.
Okay.
Like under the couch leg, which my parents didn't love for sure.
Yeah.
But it was really hard to crash a car properly.
Sure.
It was easy to like flatten it from the roof down, but that's not how it crashed in real life. So I was like trying to like do it like vertically and
Yeah,
smush
yeah.
it down so the
Okay.
hood would be like
Yeah, the
crumpled up.
front. Oh my gosh. Attention to detail. It's always
yeah.
been there.
It's always been there.
Yeah.
And that was just my youth, and from there my my
Well,
mom.
I'm sure growing up in Canada, like naturally, you had to explore hockey as a sport, right? So,
I did. I
um,
did. I mean, obviously you can't not skate.
okay,
It's kind of a a way of life.
yeah,
If you don't play hockey, whether if it's street hockey
right,
with your friends or pond hockey in the
yeah.
winter, you kind of
It's
like
just something you do,
suddenly you're just not playing with friends because
right?
everyone's doing
Everyone's
it.
doing it, yeah,
And similar to what basketball is in Indiana or what football is
sure,
in better part of all the United States. So
yeah,
it was. I never had any lessons. I never played actually a competitive game of hockey.
okay,
Although I was very close. I
got it.
was basically, so my mom drove a school bus for work at the time.
Okay,
And so now, fast forward, I'm 5, 6 years old. And so when I wasn't in school, instead of hiring a babysitter, I would just go on the bus with my mom and just
sure,
sit right behind the driver's seat and mind my business with my toy cars and
yep,
just do my thing. And then one day, I would love to figure out who it was
right,
just to say thanks. But he came in with photos of him driving go-karts, racing go-karts. And he was like, "Oh, I see, like I see you're always playing with cars. Like I race too." And showed us the pictures, and I told my mom. And then the next week or the weekend after, we went to the go-kart track that he races at, which was
right,
only 15 or 20 minutes from our house. And I get to this Disney World of a place, right? And I see little kids running around in their little race suits and their helmets. And I'm just like, what's happening?
right.
Where are we right now?
Like you've got all this energy and passion. You're
Yeah.
relentlessly watching races. You're reenacting it. Some chance encounter on the bus, and all of a sudden, like you find yourself in a place where, wait a minute, I might be able to do this.
Yeah, we had no idea that go-karting was even a sport,
Okay.
right? Like we never really explored how someone makes it to a professional motorsport, right?
Sure.
So then we start looking into it. I told my parents that I want to do this. That at the time I was 6 years old, that I want to race go-karts, and it's expensive,
Yeah.
right? So my parents told me if I wanted to pursue this, I have to stop playing baseball, stop playing football. We're not going to sign up for hockey, which I was planning to do
Sure.
that winter. And I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And
Wow, to have that conviction at 6 years old, when faced with that focus,
yeah,
like there was definitely passion there.
it was. I mean, I just, yeah, at the time, I don't remember the conversation, obviously,
Yeah.
but it was, apparently I was pretty confident that it's what I wanted to do. And it was, so we found a family that was just getting out of motorsport altogether.
Okay.
So we bought the go-kart, a toolbox, the trailer, used tires, tools,
Yeah.
like the suit, helmet, the whole
Right.
thing. Like they just like got rid of the whole shebang. And I remember we bought the whole thing for $3,000,
Okay.
which at the
Which
time,
at the time was
yeah,
not an insignificant
yes.
amount of
I mean,
money.
when you
Yep.
think about starting
Sure.
a sport,
Yeah.
hockey's expensive with, at the time, again, maybe $1,000 of
Yeah.
hockey equipment.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot higher, but
Yeah.
and so to start off like right off the pop with $3,000, it was
Yeah.
obviously a
Well, I'm
massive.
sure your parents had to see the conviction, right? This wasn't like a
Yeah.
whim, right?
And
Like you had-
and prior to that, I had driven kind of like rental go-karts
Okay.
on family vacations and stuff, and like I would lap all the kids.
yeah,
And my parents were like, oh, maybe maybe he's
there's
pretty good
something
at this.
there.
So then the whole winter passed. We have this go-kart in our garage, and like the whole family's just staring at this thing, just waiting for the first time for the snow to melt so we can actually give it a go.
Right.
And we show up for the first race, it's the spring of now 1996.
Okay.
And turns out I was too young. We didn't know the rules.
Oh my gosh.
So I was a year too young to do it.
All this investment, all this
Yeah.
build up, all this anticipation,
Yeah.
and now you gotta wait.
Yeah. So the whole first year, my older brother Trevor
Okay.
drove the go-kart, and the whole family would just go to the racetrack, and I had the torture of watching my brother do something that I wanted to do. And but I just loved being at the track.
Okay.
It was so peaceful for me. I wanted to be in it. And then finally a year later I got my chance, and
Oh, that's
we just
awesome.
never looked back.
So that was the start. Talk to me about that trajectory from there, right? You kind of go through the ranks, karting in Canada, and I think you ended up in Europe for an extended period of time at a very young age, right?
I did. Yeah, it's karting in Canada is a little unique because for half the year you can't do the sport that you want
Right.
to do. So for Canadians, you end up going to the US and often to Florida in the winter to
Okay.
continue racing, because you're racing against people that get to do this year round, where us Canadians can only do it for 6 months of the
Sure.
year. Which obviously comes with a healthy price tag,
Yeah.
right? And Canadian motorsport is very strong and very competitive. I tell everyone that most of us that grew up in the Greater Toronto area, we're super fortunate that there was like 5 or 6 very good go-kart tracks
Okay.
within 100 square kilometers, like of each other. So you were constantly, I felt the competition level was very high,
Okay.
and I thought it bred a great generation of young Canadians. And so we were always racing around our local tracks, doing our stuff, and then there was kind of regional championships and Canadian championships that you would
Yep.
participate in. But kind of the next step would be to like start racing in the US. There
Okay.
was bigger championships there, more kind of like international competition. So the family would pack up our stuff and we would drive around all over
So
North
this really
America.
became a family endeavor, right?
It did. And, I think, so my brother, when he drove that first year, he didn't necessarily enjoy the driving aspect of it, but he loved the mechanical aspect of the go-kart. So at him being, at the time, 12 years old, Monday to Friday, he would take the cart apart, clean every nut and bolt, put it all back together. And like that, he loved the Monday to Friday
Okay.
of motorsport. And then on the weekend,
Which a lot of people don't necessarily see,
Yeah,
right? They see the
the
race on the
behind-the-scenes
weekend,
stuff,
but the
yeah.
behind-the-scenes stuff, it's a huge part
Yeah.
of success, right?
It is. And it was one of those things for him where kind of the chore was driving,
Yeah.
it seemed like, right? Where I was the complete opposite. I didn't want anything to do
Very
with
complimentary. I like
Yeah.
where this is going.
And so when I started driving the following year, my brother, now then being 13, was immediately my like mechanic.
Okay.
And so with supervision of my dad and
Sure.
my mom, and we were kind of this family trio just taking on the world. And and then as my brother started getting older and getting more confident, more mechanically inclined, and
Yeah.
we all started just progressing together. So I say by the time my brother was 14 years old, like he was my mechanic, and my dad was
amazing.
kind of just supervising, and my mom was making sure we all stayed in line, basically. So
That's
it was
great.
and then the racing was always really expensive, right? And we, as a family, we couldn't afford 4 flights to Florida or 4 flights to here, 4
Sure.
flights to there. So we would just pack up the car and we would drive our stuff all around
Right.
North America.
A lot
So
of
like
miles.
we would drive Toronto to Las Vegas. We would like
My gosh.
we would just
wow.
we drive everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was just a more cost-effective way to go do it. So that was kind of better part of my childhood, was just bouncing around from racetrack to racetrack. And thankfully I had a skill for it. Winning never comes easy, but it came often.
Yeah.
Um,
So that consistency ultimately leads you to an opportunity to kind of take a leap and end up racing in Europe.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
So how it progressed from there was, so I made it to the highest levels of go-kart racing,
Okay.
where you're driving 60 horsepower engines on a thing that, with the driver in it, weighs under 400 pounds.
Okay.
So it's like better power to weight ratio of a Formula One car. And you're doing this as a 14, 15-year-old kid.
Wow.
And so what ended up happening from there, the next then progression is you move up to car racing. And as a family at this point, we were already tapped out. When I was 14 years old, we had accrued so much debt through racing that my family had to sell their home
Wow.
in Guelph, Ontario, and we had to move in with my uncle in Toronto.
So
And
this was real family commitment to a vision and a dream for you to rise through the ranks
Oh,
in terms of
absolutely.
racing. Wow.
Absolutely. And I remember like the conversations when I was 12, 13 years old, like my parents saying like, you don't have to do, like, we need to know, like, do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And I kept saying yes. I kept
All
saying
right.
yes. And it kind of clicked at a young age. I mean, I felt like what motorsport gave me was, at a very early age, I had a lot of appreciation for value, right? I understood the sacrifices that my parents were making. I understood that what $400 is, right? Like
Sure.
for me to get a set of tires that cost $400, that was like the best day on earth, right? So it was always just, I had a very good understanding, and it kind of made me, I guess, take it a lot more seriously than a lot of my competitors did. because for me this was my life. Like
Yeah.
at the age of
And you saw sacrifices that your parents, brother
at every
were
turn.
making at every
Yeah.
turn. So like there was an economic recognition of
Yeah.
like the total family investment in this vision,
Because I
right?
would say by the time I was 12 years old, I knew I couldn't look back on this. Like I had to make this work.
Okay.
I had to have a career in motorsport. And I didn't know what it looked like at the time.
So there's a lot of motivation, right? You're excited about driving, but you also felt responsibility based
For sure,
on
because I saw, like, especially once I started becoming a teenager, knowing what my brother gave up of his teenage years of his life, working with me at go-kart tracks, and, he got a part-time job after school at a kart shop where he never saw a paycheck. It just all went to parts credits to pay for our passion.
Wow.
And my brother is a very selfless person, right? And he always tells me, like, I liked it too. It wasn't like I was just doing it for you. Like we were a team, right? And it's very much true. Like I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the support of my brother and the support of my parents.
I think oftentimes everybody sees the elite athlete, but they don't recognize all of the components of the team that come together
sure.
to make that happen. So I think, the fact that you are so connected to that and so appreciative of it really speaks to your value system.
Yeah, it's great. And I think, if we fast forward to today, I made it to where I did in my life. My brother owns one of the most successful go-karting organizations in all of Canada. So he stayed in that industry when I moved up to car racing, and we both made great careers. And my parents, when they look back on their sacrifice, they're like, their two sons.
I love that little spark,
Yeah.
right? An interest in racing just blossoms
Yeah.
into,
And and my parents always tell us that their two sons are literally living their passions.
That's
so
great.
It's like what better life to live.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about Europe. You went there at a young age, right? 16.
I did, yeah.
Talk to me about that experience. That had to be exciting in terms of taking, a step up in level of competition and the opportunity set as a driver, but also pretty hard. You're 16 and you're going to a foreign country, different language. Talk to me a little bit about that experience.
Yep. So once I finished racing in go-karts, I did my first year of car racing in a series that's called the Formula BMW Championship. It was similar to what Formula 4 would be now for anyone that knows kind of the ladder system of Formula car racing. And there was this one race at the end of my first year in 2005 of racing cars called, they made like this world final race. So Formula BMW had a lot of different regions. There was one in USA, there was one in Asia, there was one in the UK, one in Germany. And they came up with a world championship concept where all of the regions would come together.
Okay.
And it was just like the best of the best. And the winner got a Formula 1 test because BMW had a Formula 1 team at the time. And I was just like, this is my in. I want to be a Formula 1 driver, win that race. I'm a Formula 1 driver. Bada bing, bada boom. Simple, right? And obviously the race was in Bahrain. So getting over there was, again, expensive. And hard to do.
Sure.
But I convinced so at the time I had a scholarship by BMW to be one of their junior drivers, a scholarship driver, where they like seeked out up and coming talents, and there was kind of the BMW junior team kind of thing. And so I was a member of that. I won the Rookie of the Year championship in 2005, which gave me the scholarship again for 2006.
Okay.
So I convinced BMW North America to give it to me up front. And I put the whole scholarship into my race to go to Bahrain.
It's a big bet on yourself at that age.
And I was like, I got to do it, right? So here I was, 16 years old, thinking like, this is my chance. This is my opportunity. And we get down to Bahrain. My brother and I go down together. We were fast through practice. I qualified on pole for the race. And then after qualifying, my car was disqualified for a technical infraction.
So you made this huge bet, and now there's a technical.
And then I was like, oh man. So now I'm starting last. And there's qualifying races. We don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but I had to start last for every qualifying race of 36 cars. And I just kept my head down, kept moving along, and finished like 6th, 5th, and 3rd in the 3 qualifying races. And that kind of caught the eye of scouts from Red Bull and scouts from kind of other driver development programs. And I remember Dr. Helmut Marko, who was the head of the Red Bull junior team program, who was at the time, they were the most famous driver development program out there, constantly seeking the next great talent. And we just started having some monologue and over lunches and just having conversations. And long and behold, in the pre-final race, I was then starting 5th for that race based off of my scores in those qualifying races. And I was like, I'm starting 5th. Like, I can still win this thing. And then like we're on. Like, this is happening. And I remember I had contact with another driver.
The resiliency's always been there, right?
I had contact with another driver. I got a puncture, a flat tire.
Okay.
And then I had to start the main race for the Formula One test and last again.
You got to believe something's working against you.
So I did all this hard work and then had to start like 30-something in the race, and I finished 6th in the race. And I remember like, well, I didn't get the F1 test with BMW, but I left with a Red Bull Junior team contract.
Fantastic.
And that paved the way for me for my entire junior career. What I ended up doing is, Helmut Marko told me to pack my bags and go to Europe to be a Formula One driver. The European junior category was a lot more competitive. All the Formula One teams are based in Europe. It was just kind of, if you wanted to pursue Formula One, you had to go overseas to do it. And so at 16, I packed up and moved off to Austria, where Red Bull's headquarters is, in Fuschl, MC. And no car, couldn't speak a lick of German or Austrian, and just tried to tackle the world.
I mean, there has to be this boldness and audacity to go down the path you've had, right? That conviction in your vision, but to take some of the risks and be open to some of these things.
I think when I think back through my storyline of my journey, nothing came easy. Right. And I feel like at every turn there was always adversity. There was always kind of the moment, the fork in the road, right? Like, do I keep working this hard, or do I stop, or whatever, right? It was like everyone has in life. And for me, it was just, I just loved the sport so much.
But out of that passion, there's this resilience and a relentlessness that when you encountered challenges, you just kept pushing forward, right?
And again, I always think back to when I was 12, 13 years old, and when my parents sold their house to keep my dream going, right? To keep mine and my brother's dream going. And I always think back on that. I was like, I knew it. I made a promise to myself that like I have to make a career out of this. The dream was obviously Formula One. I had no idea how that was going to happen, but frankly, we didn't have enough money to even like race a go-kart anymore. So it was one of those deals where I had no idea how I was going to get there, but I was going to give it my best shot and try to ideally pay back my parents one day, right, for this massive life investment, right? Like, then obviously with the time frames and everything, then we get into the 2008 financial crisis and everything else, and the factory that my dad was working at closed down, and there's moving all around like the greater Ontario area, just trying to find work here and there. And I was in Europe the whole time pursuing the dream, knowing that my parents basically don't own a house anymore. They're like just scraping by, finding any job they can. And they never complained. There was never resentment. There was just all support every step of the way.
I hear that deep appreciation for the sacrifices they make, and it also motivated you, who are already motivated, to be that much more committed to success. So you raced for a number of years in Europe. You end up coming back to Indianapolis. Tell me a little bit about that, and then how that leads into a horrific crash that in some ways has altered the trajectory of your racing career, but in some ways still speaks back to that level of resilience that you've always demonstrated. So
yeah, it does. So I moved over to Europe at the end of the 2007 year. Raced in Europe in the junior categories right up until 2011, where I was racing in a series called the Formula Renault 3.5 Championship. And I was a reserve driver for Formula One team, the Virgin Formula One team at the time. And I was like right on the doorstep of the dream of getting to Formula One. And I won the championship that year in 2011. And that was my big in to get to Formula One. I did all of my, what I simplify as kind of your, like, they're called young driver tests, but they're
Okay.
glorified tryouts, where every team in Formula One has to run a driver that has never raced in Formula One before. And so I did a test with the Virgin F1 team. I did a test with the Renault, which is now the Alpine Formula One team. And both the tests went amazingly well. But then there was kind of just like a financial roadblock or a roster roadblock where there was just like no real avenue for me to get to Formula One. And after the test concluded, I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I did a really good job, but like, I don't know if I'm going to get it. On the Monday after the test, I got a phone call from a man named Toto Wolff,
Okay.
who now is the president of Mercedes Motorsport, the owner of Mercedes F1. And he, at the time, he had stake in Williams Formula One and in the Mercedes DTM team. So DTM is a German touring car championship where the 3 premium German car brands race against each other. And he was an investor in the team that operated the factory Mercedes outfit. And he called me and said, like, hey, I was watching from turn 4 in Abu Dhabi during your young driver test. Like, what you did was really impressive in both of those cars. Would you be interested in testing and trying out for the Mercedes DTM team? And I was like, yes, like 100% yes. Like, so I remember I flew from Abu Dhabi to Toronto, and I was home thinking like, oh, what's next, right? And then get this phone call, and next day jumped on a plane to Barcelona and and did my tryout with them, and it went really well. And they offered me a multi-year contract to be a factory Mercedes racing driver.
Great.
And it was probably one of the better moments of my life. And it was like finally that moment of accomplishment, right?
You feel like you made it.
I did. And it was, in a way, I was giving up on my dream of Formula One because it was really hard to kind of still make that work. But what I kept thinking to that 12-year-old boy of, what do you want, to be a professional race car driver or go all in on Formula One and maybe end up with nothing, right? And so I took the option of just being a professional racing driver because Formula One wasn't dead. It was just unlikely. And the more important thing was just finally receiving a paycheck and
Sure.
and racing for a factory team like Mercedes is, they have their history, their legacy is unmatched, outside of like a Ferrari or something, right?
That adaptability is critical, right? You have the relentless vision on this is what I want to achieve, but the ability to kind of pivot and realize you're still fulfilling that desire to be a professional race car driver.
Exactly. So I did my first professional race for Mercedes-Benz in 2012, and I raced in the DTM series until the end of 2017. And what really sparked my return back to North America, at this point, I had been in Europe for the better part of 10 years and doing it all alone, without family, without friends, while all my friends were off exploring college life and the parties and everything.
People don't see that side of it.
No,
right?
they
see, you're living the life, you're in Europe, you're
yeah,
driving race cars, but there's a lot of quiet and a lot of loneliness and a lot of like hard work.
for sure. And
behind the
I'll never
scenes.
say, oh, poor me, right?
Right.
Like, but at the same time, like I knew what I signed up for.
Sure.
I knew, the sacrifices that someone has to make to pursue this career. But it's hard not to feel lonely sometimes, right? When you're in a foreign country that you really you don't know anybody other than your mechanics and your engineers and the team that you race
It's a little
for.
isolating, right?
But they have their families in their hometowns, and so you're always like the fifth wheel on everything, and like you just never feel really, yeah, like loved at the end of the day, right?
Sure.
Like, and then you spend just all your time on your FaceTime calls with your loved ones back home, and I was ready for a change. I didn't know it at the time, but then Mercedes did an all hands call, and Toto Wolff told all the drivers that they were actually quitting DTM to pursue another category. So at the end of the 2018 season, all of us would be basically without jobs. Mercedes was going to try to put us all places and be loyal to us, but there's no
Another curveball.
so there was no guarantee. And I took that as an opportunity to take my career into my own hands like I always have. And IndyCar was always something that was on my radar. I had a lot of friends that were racing over there. Coming back to North America was very encouraging to me. And I was able to put a deal together to leave my Mercedes contract a year early at the end of 2017 and join IndyCar in 2018. And even that was strategic for me because IndyCar was doing a new car for the 2018 season, a new aerodynamic package.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought as a rookie, it was the optimum time to enter because
Playing field level.
exactly. It wasn't this like ironed out car where the veterans have been driving for the last 5 years like they have been, right? It was going to be a new playing field for everybody. And I thought that was an opportunity to hit the ground running. And so that's why I decided to leave my Mercedes contract a year early to pursue that. And I think it was the right move. My first race in IndyCar, I qualified first on pole and nearly won the race. Unfortunately, we had a crash with I think 2 laps left, so I ended up finishing, I don't even know, 20th or something. But
Okay.
110 lap race. I think I led 90 something laps of the race.
Fantastic.
It was mine to win, and unfortunately, it just slipped through my fingers. But got my first podium in my second race in IndyCar, and we kind of like I just felt I'd never felt better as an athlete. I never felt happier as an athlete. I felt like I unlocked this potential I didn't even know I had.
Amazing.
Just being an IndyCar driver, it was just so. I felt like I was driving like I was as a kid, like just for the joy of the sport. You know, when I was in Europe, it got a little bit stale, it got a little political. You know, at Mercedes, it was an amazing opportunity, but you race for the manufacturer. It's Mercedes first every time, and the driver was secondary. You know, and IndyCar was the complete opposite. The driver was front and center. And it's like it brought me back to how I fell in love with the sport as a kid in a go-kart, and it was just
That'd be an amazing full circle.
and it was just so
moment, right?
fulfilling to just have that opportunity and to be in that kind of that flow state as an athlete. And it was all going amazingly well until suddenly it wasn't. And so it was the 14th race of the year at Pocono Raceway in Pennsylvania. I was running in fourth place at the time, passing for third place. And unfortunately, both of us didn't want to give an inch, and we had contact at very high speed, and my car went airborne at over 220 miles an hour.
My gosh.
And ended up going airborne up into the catch fence to basically keep the car inside the track. But then it was also a sudden stop. So I went from 212 miles an hour to a net zero in less than 0.4 of a second. It was over 200 Gs at impact and spun me around and spit me back out. And it ended up, obviously, with a spinal cord injury being the worst of it all. But broke both my hands, my right arm, broke both my legs in multiple places, 6 ribs, pulmonary contusion. I was put into a medically induced coma for 10 days. It was, tough time. But
So from that pinnacle, feeling like you're in that flow state, unfortunately, horrific crash. When you come out, what do you remember? Like initially, you and I talked a little bit about this and you're preparing for our conversation. But as an athlete, you've had resiliency throughout, right? Every setback you meet with, well, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to plow through it. I'm going to get back on the horse. Was that part of the natural reaction? Tell me a little bit about the mindset as you kind of initially react, and then reality sets in that, like, these are some serious challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, I think the reality took quite a bit of time to finally sink in. Once I came to from the coma, I knew I wanted to still race.
No doubt.
Well, the human mind's a beautiful thing. I have no recollection of the crash at all.
Okay.
So I've seen videos of it.
That's got to be hard to watch it.
I've heard people talk about it, right?
Is it hard to watch it?
It is and it isn't.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's me because I see it's my car, but like
Right.
there was never even a flashback.
Okay.
Like, it's just like out of sight, out of mind in
Probably a good thing.
a way, right?
Yeah.
And like, but the whole day I don't remember. Like, I vaguely remember. At the time, NBC was the broadcasting partner of that race, and because my rookie season had been going so well, they had been filming kind of a mini series over the last few events that was going to go live right after that race in Pocono.
Okay.
So on the driver parade before the start of the race, I had an NBC person in the truck with me because we were promoting the
series?
piece that was going to come at the conclusion of that race, which never aired. Because of obviously what happened. So, but like I remember, but like it only clicked once I saw a photo of it. Like at the time, like there was really nothing. But yeah, I mean, from my side, once I obviously started realizing the severity of my injuries, and it was hard not to when you realize that, you know, your legs were so broken that they couldn't even operate immediately from the swelling. So I was in external fixators on both my legs, like basically big bird cages on both legs. Yeah, the obvious neck brace, back brace, arm casts, hand casts, right? I was pretty much, wasn't much I could do. But like I know bones heal, right? The unknown for me was a spinal cord injury, which really we didn't know really anything about. You know, you hear that people can make full recoveries. You hear people can walk again. You know, you hear all the time people break their backs. But like breaking your back and having a spinal cord injury, although are in a similar area, the outcome is incredibly different, right?
Okay.
If you get any damage to the spinal cord itself, if you get any contusion or any bruising to the cord, or if there's any contact to the cord, it just doesn't heal. It just forms scar tissue, which creates nerve blockages. So worst case scenario, the cord gets severed or you lose spinal cord fluid, which thankfully I didn't have, but I had some pretty severe bruising on my spinal cord from the bone basically pushing into the spinal cord from the back fractures that I had. And so there's a lot of unknown of, you know, like what can the body do, right? In my case, it did quite a bit in hindsight when you think back to it, but you could have a T4 incomplete spinal cord injury, same on paper as me, and our outcome could be 100% different. You know, I opted for like the evidence of the story, the hard work mentality. Once I got to rehab and started working, I was working out 6 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Resilience and relentlessness.
I knew who I was as a person, and if I didn't just go all in and drive myself into the ground, I'd wonder what could I have done differently, or if I worked harder, would I have had a better prognosis? Would I have had a better outcome from this, right? And so once I started getting some muscles firing and nerves regenerating, I went to a rehab facility in Inglewood, Colorado called Gregg Hospital. It's a world-renowned spinal cord and traumatic brain injury facility. And that was just like my breath of fresh air that I needed to kind of, one, give me the motivation, because I was one of hundreds of patients going through the same thing. And I watched people walk out the front door of that rehab center when they were done. And I'm like, that's going to be me. I'm going to do that. And I opted for, the hard work.
So a lot of times recovery is described in physical terms, but I'm sure this journey was, you know, part physical, part emotional, part mental, spiritual. Talk to me about that. I mean, seeing other people and saying that will be me. Talk to me about that. It had to be stress you in every possible way to kind of make the recovery that you have.
It did. I mean, I'm a big believer that you can manifest success, right? And I was just so convinced that I was going to walk out that front door. I didn't. But I was so convinced that like that could be me, because I've seen other people, if they did it, why not me, right? And I was getting nerves firing and things were working, and you know, it's just exciting time. But like you talked about, like as much emphasis on this story of how physically demanding the rehab was, mentally it was 10 times harder, right? Like you're laying on a PT table trying to like envision your toe wiggle for weeks, like trying to like do like mental imagery of just trying to get your toe to move. And it's the weirdest sensation because you feel like the burning of the nerves, but then the toe doesn't move. So like what you remember a toe moving, like it feels all the same, but it doesn't move. It's like it just ends somewhere. And then finally, after 3 weeks of just trying to do the same thing, what felt like every minute of the day, finally it twitches. And you're just like, wait, did I do that? Like, what happened there? And then like suddenly it twitches again. And then it's like, oh man, so I can do that now, right? And then it's like, so then what's next? Let's see if I can move my ankle. Let's see if I can flex my calf, right? And it's like, just do whatever you could. But like when you're laying on a table for like 6 hours a day trying to do things that you can't do, right? It's just, yeah, it
So I'm sure there had to be points where doubt creeped in, right?
every day,
Yeah.
every day. I don't think there was a day that passed in my recovery where I didn't cry at some point. Some of happiness, some of frustration, some of just pure anger, right? And then you go back to your hospital room and try to sleep in a hospital environment, which is never easy, right?
Sure.
And then you wake up at 6 a.m. to go do it again. And
So it would have been so easy at any point on that journey to just give up and say, I'm not gonna get back behind the wheel of a race car again. But you didn't lose that, like that vision of ultimately getting back into
yeah,
the car. Now at some point, like realization of what you were going to be physically able to do had to set in. But you didn't lose the idea of I will find my way back behind the wheel of a race car. Talk to me about that pivot and evolution, because throughout your entire career, like there was a relentlessness in the goal I want to achieve, but an adaptability and a realization that you had to pivot and adjust and adapt. Talk to me about that, because the destination of wanting to be back behind the wheel of a car, like you didn't change that goal, but the path to get there had to evolve and adapt.
yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is, so the first year of my recovery, I really wasn't even thinking about driving.
Okay.
So I had proposed to my wife Carly at the end of 2017, and so we were planning to get married in 2018, and we actually pushed the wedding back a year before the accident, just because of how busy our new life was in Indianapolis and IndyCar and everything. But so we were getting married in September of 2019. I got paralyzed in August of 2018. And once I started rehab and everything, like I wanted to still give my partner like the wedding of her dreams, right? I wanted to stand at the altar. I wanted to give her a first dance. I wanted to do all the things that the wedding that she's always dreamed of having, right? And so for the better part of my recovery, she was bouncing around between flying to Denver to visit me, to be supportive of me, and then flying back to Indianapolis to do home renovations to make our home wheelchair accessible, and then planning a wedding, and then coming back out to Denver. And like, she was just working so hard. And I was like, I just want to give her that one thing.
I mean, that really resonates with me, that at a point where it would have been so easy for you to be focused on yourself and mired in, why did this happen to me? Like your vision to think, well, I need to give something to someone else that I love. That's pretty powerful.
It was, but I also like, it was a win-win.
Sure.
Right? Because if I stood at an altar, it also got me closer
Right.
walking out that door. So
it's good context.
it was kind of like one of those things, but I definitely, that's what drove my motivation. And every time she wasn't in Denver supporting me, I was just working with the PTs on just trying to stand up, just working on, like, I think I was working on it for about 4 months before I finally showed Carly that I can stand up out of my wheelchair. And then like we filmed like the first time that I did it, and like it was like a really special moment.
Sure.
Because it was like a month out from our wedding. And at the time she knew what my goals were, but she hadn't seen me do it. So to finally like to see it for the first time, and this kind of, we both understood that like this might happen, right? I might be able to do a first dance. And so it wasn't much of a dance. I stood there and gave her a little twirl, but it's not far off.
Still qualifies.
It wasn't far off of probably my dancing
Sure, there
abilities.
wasn't a dry eye in the house.
No, it was an amazing moment. But then, I knew that driving was always on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, from early on in the recovery, I knew I wanted to drive again. I just didn't know what it looked like. And then, in my mind, again, I didn't know with how much I was recovering what the vision of motorsport looked like. Would I need a full adapted race car? Would I need nothing? Would I need maybe just a throttle pedal or just a brake pedal? Or, like it was really unknown at the time. So it was hard to really focus on what my comeback would look like because my body was changing so much.
Okay.
So that's kind of why I stopped putting myself through pain of thinking about it and just tried to focus on the recovery aspect and just be like present in that moment. And then, the wedding was great. And then, pandemic in 2020 kind of put once the wedding finished and at the start of the 2020 calendar year, I was like, I need to get in a race car. Like, this is what I need to do. I'm ready. I'm fit. I'm out of the hospital. Like, let's go, game on.
And then we have a global pandemic.
Yeah, and then we have a global pandemic. But long and behold, it ended up being in my journey silver lining because
How so? Tell me more.
so I was struggling to get any traction to find a team that was willing to put in the development to create a hand control system that doesn't exist and put it into their race car and then have me drive that race car in reality, right? It's time consuming. It was frankly a distraction. Race teams, like any business, there's not like
They're
a
laser focused, right?
yeah, there's not like a surplus of staff that you can just throw on a special project, right?
Right. So you have this desire, this vision, and you're struggling to find
And I was just
someone
really,
that you could partner
exactly.
with.
I was really struggling for traction to get anywhere. And once the world shut down, racing wasn't happening. But everyone had these marketing budgets, and suddenly esports came center stage in motorsports. And IndyCar had an esports challenge, and the IMSA series had an esports challenge. And I got approached by a simulator company to get a simulator installed into my home. I knew that for me, the first step in getting into a car in reality would be through simulation,
Right.
just because you can try so many different things for half the cost. And I finally had a home sim adapted with hand controls, and I was just driving that thing 10 hours a day.
So now you have an
every
outlet,
day.
like all this
Yeah.
pent up desire, like you can pour yourself into it.
Yeah, and then not
immerse.
only that, then I was doing IndyCar races, although virtual, against IndyCar drivers and competing. Right? I'm like, I still got this. Right?
That had to be very validating.
It was the best feeling in the
Oh,
world. Yeah, I mean, I finished 8th in my first IndyCar race that I did, and like I remember thinking back, and I was like, I don't even know how I did that. Like that was like so cool. And like that made me realize that the hunger to drive never left, and my ability to drive didn't leave my body. It was just I need to figure out how to do it differently.
Okay.
And then that's where, I knew trying to find the right partner was going to be key.
So I think throughout your journey, there's been this constant theme of, the objective, the goal, the desire, the relentlessness to pursue it, the resiliency in the face of obstacles. But ultimately, coming out of, an external shock like COVID that creates an opportunity for you to start to do simulations, like to get back into a physical race car, you needed ultimately others to buy into the vision you had. Talk to me about, who you partner with, the collaboration that's led you to physically get behind a real race car again and realize that vision.
Yeah, so a lot of it was just fortunate timing. So then again, so all through 2020, I'm just doing sim racing and getting better and better and more competitive with each passing week. Still trying to find a way to drive a car in real life. And there's a team owner, Brian Herda, who owns Brian Herda Autosport with his business partner, Sean Jones. Brian Herda himself had a legendary motorsport career in sports car racing and IMSA and IndyCar. He's won the Indy 500 multiple times as a team owner, but he's also just an amazing human being. He called me up at the end of 2020, introduced himself, and obviously I was well aware of who Brian was. And he just asked me, like, driver to driver, do you want to drive? Like, do you want to race again? And I was like, yes. Like,
You wanted to see that
without pause, 100%. And he was like, that's what I thought. And he's like, I might have some opportunities. Let's keep in touch. And like that was the end of the phone call. And I was like, okay. So what's next? And what I didn't know behind the scenes is there was already a disabled driver by the name of Michael Johnson, who was paralyzed as a kid racing dirt bikes, and still loved motorsport like we all do, and started doing four-wheeled motorsports. And he was joining the Brian Herda Autosport team, but he was bringing his own hand control system with him. And with the way it worked, like he owned his car, and the Brian Herda Autosport was just doing the services and operating it. So Brian Herda Autosport had a hand-controlled race car at their disposal through Michael Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the in. Right. And that was the opportunity. And so when Brian then called me a few months later, which felt like a very long period of time, he asked me, what are you doing on May 4th, 2021? And I was like, Brian, you tell me. I've been waiting for this call for a long time. Like, you tell me where we're going. And he was like, well, let's go to Mid-Ohio and let's get you back in a race car. And at this point,
what emotions did you feel when you got that call?
I remember just hanging up the phone, and I was just like yelling And then Carly was in the other room. I was like, it's happening. It's happening.
You're back to that little kid, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
my
And it was like,
gosh.
then it was like moments like I need to prepare. Like, am I physically fit enough to drive a race car? Am I, right? Like, when you do your spinal cord rehab for so long, like, you're not really in like game shape. You're not doing any conditioning. It's all just neurological strength and development and everything. So you're not really doing even upper body strength, neck strength,
There's
all of the
physical
athletic
demands
stuff.
in a car, right?
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I got like 6 weeks now to be an athlete. And like I was always at the gym every day and doing as much as I could. And, but yeah, I remember like getting to that track, and what people don't realize about this story is May 3rd is my wife's birthday. And May 3rd, 2021 was her 30th birthday.
Okay.
Obviously quite a milestone. And I remember telling her like this is happening. And so Mid-Ohio is kind of in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. Like the closest city is Mansfield, Ohio. Columbus is about an hour and a half away. And I was planning a surprise 30th for her in Indianapolis, and had to cancel that. And told her like, but we get to go to Mansfield, Ohio for your 30th, and you can watch me drive race cars. But that's just her. Like, she's so supportive.
Yeah.
You know, we settled on we're going to do a nice dinner in Columbus on her birthday, and then do the extra drive to the track the next morning. But the big thing for me was like, how do I maximize this opportunity? And the car was a Hyundai Veloster TCR car. And Brian Herta Autosport was like the factory Hyundai team in that series. And I knew like I needed to align with the OEM. I needed to get the OEM on board. Like that was like goal number one. And I was well aware that I had this potential to tell a great story and to give Hyundai and Brian Herta Autosport a ROI that maybe they had never seen before in their time together. So we opened up the whole track day to the public, to the press. We reached out to anyone and everyone. There was way too many people for a private track day in Columbus and Mansfield, Ohio on a May 4th. But that was kind of the goal, was just to create this buzz, and to obviously a big moment for me and for a lot of the motorsport community, my first time back in a real race car. And I just wanted to maximize everything. And it definitely came with some added pressure. Like I hadn't even sat in a race car yet. And now there's hundreds of journalists all here, like capturing the story. And I was like, I don't know, I might do one lap and realize it's not for me anymore. You know, I had done some adaptive sports during my recovery, and like it was never as fulfilling in my mind as what the true sport was, you know? And I'm like, what if racing is the same thing? Like, what if driving with hand controls isn't as fulfilling as driving with my feet? Like, what am I going to do?
But you got to take the shot, right?
But you got to take the shot.
And you've put all this pressure on yourself, but you're taking the shot.
And so I do my first laps, and it was a raining, cold, pretty miserable day, to be honest. And
we're definitely not helping the Ohio
Yeah.
tourism.
it was just one of those days, right? It was
Sure.
just a gray, gloomy
Sure.
spring day. But on my first lap, the car like slid around a little bit, and I caught it, and I was like, okay, like I got this. It feels just the same. Because also with paralysis, everyone scares you that like, because you lose some sensory and you lose a lot of things, that like driving a race car, driving any car, you know, your body is kind of this like gyro sensor. Like you feel what the car is doing
Feeling everything.
through the body.
Right.
And so like people told me like, oh, like you won't be able to feel the car sliding because like you can't feel your backside, or you can't feel the bottom of your legs, or you can't feel this, or you can't feel that. And thankfully, the first time the car slid, I caught it, and I was just like, huh, screw those guys. I
love it.
I got
defiance,
this.
right?
Yeah, I got
You have
this.
to have an element of defiance to say, I'm going to do something like unprecedented.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And then in the end, it has ended up being like the perfect day. You know, I never put a wheel wrong. It was also a little stressful because I wanted to push the boundaries and push the limits a little bit. But the last thing I wanted was a headline of like, Robert Wickens back in a race car, but he crashed. Right? And like, I didn't want any doubt that I can't do this. So I just took, obviously, as many risks as I was willing to take, but it was really just like disciplined driving, just making sure that I just did what I was there to do, which was just to get back in a race car. which was tough because I'm a competitive guy and there was other cars driving around and I wanted to be faster than them. But it was just an amazing opportunity, and that set the groundwork to get me in a race car full time again. And for the 2022 season, I partnered with Hyundai and Brian Hood Autosport, and we embarked on a new journey together.
Well, that's fantastic, and that journey is obviously a very personal journey for you to get individually back behind the wheel of a race car. But this is also incredibly empowering for a whole community of people that, see what you're doing, and maybe there's a spark that gives somebody else an idea that I can do that. How do you think about that spirit of, in doing this, for yourself and realizing this vision, you're also giving other people visibility and a path of empowerment to not feel constrained by obstacles and limitations and pursue something like this?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like when I was doing all this, I was doing it for selfish reasons, right? Like I loved my sport. I loved motorsports so much. I wanted to get back. When I was paralyzed at 29 years old, I felt like I had just reached the peak of my abilities and I was in the prime of my career.
And it was taken away.
And then I lost 4 years of my prime, right? And I know I can't get it back, but I want it back. So for me, like I was doing it all, frankly, for selfish gain. Little did I know that there was going to come added responsibilities of now I am this beacon, this lifeline for someone that might be having a hard day, right? And it's something that I never really considered or crossed my mind, that not even people fighting through injuries, or like someone might just be having a tough day and they go like, oh, well, Robert Wickens had a pretty tough day and look at him now, right? Like it was, I'm happy to carry that responsibility now. And now I feel like with where we are now, I'm partnering with Bosch and trying to create a more adaptive form of motorsport for the next generations. It's, I'm honored to have the opportunity to not only be that lifeline for anyone else going through a hard time, but more importantly, I would love motorsport to be a more adaptive, approachable sport for the next generations. Like maybe there's kids in go-karts that would love to race, but they don't think they can because they don't have use of their legs, or maybe whatever it is. So, this whole journey, we haven't been, the main people developing it. Like there's been people before me that have raced with hand controls, some with a lot of success. And I've kind of just took the baton, and now it's my turn to take it to the next step and use latest technologies and everything to try to create, frankly, a curriculum of what adaptive motorsport looks like. Because on my journey, we've had to develop everything from scratch. Nothing's existed. There's no real like textbook on what happens. You get into any car in the world, whether if it's a left-hand drive car or right-hand drive car, if you're in Australia or in the United States or in the United Kingdom, you get into the car, the throttle pedals on the right-hand side, the brakes in the middle or on the left, and if there's a clutch, it's on the far left, right? But with hand controls, obviously the level of adaptation comes into play. What's your body capable of doing?
Mm-hmm.
But I've driven now 3 different cars with hand controls, and all 3 have been different controls, right? And what I want to try to do is create a curriculum. So if you do get into a race car for the first time, it can all be the same or as similar as possible. Because when I jump from car to car, I have to learn the controls in parallel to the car. Where if you get into the race car, you know where the throttle and brake is, you know where the clutch is. It might feel a little bit different, but you know where they are. Where I'm like thinking like, oh, like this stick is my brake today. Like this is over here. And you're just like trying to like remember ahead of each turn, like where everything is. So that's the goal in the future. I'd love to make motorsport more accessible, not only for myself, but also for any individual.
I think it's an inspiring journey, and that idea of recognizing that other people started the process, and you've taken the baton, and now you're carrying it forward. You're really, blazing a new trail, and it's incredibly empowering for anyone that's sitting there saying, "This is something I want to achieve." And more broadly, I mean, the resiliency that you've demonstrated in your life is incredible.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I know you're a father of 3 kids.
Yep.
How do you think about them ultimate? I know they're very young, but when they are able to see you with the challenges you face, get back behind a race car, what does that mean to you when you think about? Obviously, you're paving a legacy for all the people that you're empowering, but how do you think about that as a father and what message you're sending to your kids?
I think the most important thing for me is I want them to think of me that I'm a good father first. Like profession is irrelevant to me at this point, right? Like I want to be a present father. I want to be there for every soccer practice. I want to do as much of it as I can. Um, but it's funny. So my oldest son Wesley, he's now 3.5. He's getting to that age with the.
Does he have Matchbox cars? Is that still
He does.
big?
He loves them. Loves them. Anything cars, wheels. He's a very mechanically inclined little boy. Like loves his Lego. He loves taking things apart and putting it back together. And I'm just like, I keep seeing my brother in it, which is really fun. But we're in the why stage, right? And he's trying to understand that. He understood pretty early on that I'm in a wheelchair, right? And he's always like, "Oh, why are you in a wheelchair? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that?" And it's like, it's funny. I don't even know if he truly knows what I do for work. He knows that I work in racing, and like, he knows I drive. Last year, I drove a blue race car, right? So every time there'd be like a sports car on the road, he'd be like, "Oh, Daddy, it's your blue, it's your race car." He's come to a couple races, hoping to get him to a couple more this year, and it's a fun time. But I think for me, goal number one is just for them to, like, I could care less of a legacy for them. I just want them to know that they had a good supportive father, and that's kind of goal number one right now from the parenting side. And then I want them to create their own paths, right? Like I would love nothing more than to share a passion with them. And if either of my 3 children tell me one day that I want to drive a go-kart, I'm going to be a little scared because of the financial burden that comes with it. But on the same side, I think like sharing that passion, I think is so special, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I'm definitely not going to push them into it. They're going to have to find it on their own. But if they ask, I'd be a hypocrite if I tell them no, right? After what my family gave to me,
right? They modeled it for you, and you can model it for them. So.
And I'm in a way better position to do that than my family ever was, and we made it just fine.
Appreciate that. One last question, and I think we have to wrap things up. For anyone out there facing a setback, whether it's a physical setback, a mental setback, challenges in life, what do you want them to take away from the journey you've been on? What do you want them to hear?
Honestly, I say this often. Physically, my recovery was tough. Mentally, it was almost impossible. It was impossible, and I wouldn't have gotten where I did if it wasn't. It finally clicked for me that asking for help and working through the mental aspect of what I was going through unlocked more physical opportunity, right? So finding a therapist, seeking help, asking, being vulnerable, like you get to this phase, and I'm sure everyone's been in this situation where you don't want to ask for help because you feel like an inconvenience to your friends or to your family or to your loved ones, right? But they all want to help you. But then you never ask. And then you kind of get into this spiral of like negativity. And the biggest thing for me is just be vulnerable, whether if it's in the office setting, whether if it's at a racetrack in your profession. Like I think there's this stigma of mental health. And if you ask for help, it's a sign of weakness, particularly in motorsport. I was fortunate, I partnered with a sports psychologist a few years prior to my accident, and I saw what it unlocked for me as an athlete. So I kind of approached my recovery in a similar manner of like, I knew mentally I had to be in the right position to get the most out of my body physically. And like the best thing I tell everyone is like, just don't be afraid just to ask for help, be vulnerable, reach out. If you're struggling with something in the office, I guarantee you there's a colleague that wants to help you. Just don't be afraid to ask.
Powerful words. Thank you, Robert. What stands out for me about your story, Robert, beyond the comeback is, all the individual decisions that led up to it. We can see the outcome. You get back behind the wheel of a race car, but there were so many things involved in the journey, going back to, that spark that gets ignited and a family that's supportive of
sure.
A kid's vision for what he wants to do, and thousands of decisions throughout. But the decision to keep moving forward when the path ahead looks nothing like the one you planned, the discipline to rebuild physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, the humility to adapt, to be creative, the vulnerability to lean on others and recognize that, partnership and human connection are part of that journey. And ultimately the willingness to share this journey with others. You have a powerful, inspiring story. That's where the power of giving shows up. It's what you carry forward and what you choose to offer to others. Despite circumstances and changes, you've demonstrated the perspective, the possibility, created empowerment for others. You are living proof that resiliency can shape something new with purpose and be inspiring to others. So thank you for joining our podcast. I know the journey for you is just beginning.
Hopefully.
It's been incredible, and we can't wait to see all that you accomplish in the future. Thanks for the time, Robert.
No, thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Great Aspirations, presented by WealthSpire Advisors, a registered investment advisor and subsidiary company of NFP Corp. If you have feedback, including suggestions for future topics and guests, contact us at clientrelations@wealthspire.com.